Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Raise the Vibe. We're in the studio today again with Jamie Wolf. She's back for more. We did a series. This is number 3 on healing trauma, and I hope you enjoy the show, you guys. And if you missed part 1 and 2, I encourage you to go back and listen to those. Those are awesome. You can even check them out on www.voiceofvashon.org/raise-the-vibe, and you can listen to those. Part 2 had a bit of a clicking through the last half, so it's easier to listen to if you go on Raise the Vibes website. Thanks, guys. Enjoy the show. Hello, this is Raise the Vibe on Voice of Vashon's 101.9 FM KVSH. I'm your host, Liz Peterson. In the studio today, I'm blessed to have Jamie Wolf back for part 3 of what's turned into a series on her work. Jamie is a meta-coach and professional speaker whose mission is to end suffering, beginning with physical and mental suffering, by teaching tools and helping people connect to their purpose in life. We've been discussing healing trauma. After having Jamie on for the first time, I was so eager to have her back to dive deeper into this topic that's so near and dear to my heart and work. So she agreed to come back and join us today and unpack even more about trauma. Today, we're going to be discussing betrayal trauma and so much more. If you missed part 1 and part 2, I encourage you to go back and listen. They're amazing. Hi, Jamie. Welcome back.
Hey, Liz.
Hey.
Thanks for having me back. I appreciate you.
So excited to have you back. Oh my gosh, this has been amazing. And I'm hoping that our listeners are really enjoying, everything that you're bringing to us.
Well, I've been getting really fantastic feedback from many, many people. So I'm loving that. They're telling me they're going back and listening 2 or 3 times because our sharing is dense.
Great.
With information. So.
That's incredible. I'm glad everybody's enjoying. We're getting some good feedback. Awesome. So how about if we start with a little recap of what we did last week and maybe a little bit about the week before? Okay. Your choice.
Okay. We started out in the first week and I told a little bit about my story, and just kind of briefly. And what we've been doing is talking about a series of tools that one can use and implement in one's life to work to heal what is going on with them. So one of my core beliefs that I said in the first, and probably my primary core belief, which was told to me by one of my resiliency factors as a child, Dorothy told me this, was that we are all created perfectly. And some people, in the Christian tradition, in the image of God, in my tradition, in the image of Goddess. And so when we talk about transformation, one of the pieces, I was reading Pema Chodron today, and I love her. I love her so much. And I love that she said this morning when I opened it, she said, transformation is not changing yourself. You're already perfect. And this is my core belief, that we were created inherently perfect. And yes, there's some behaviors that aren't working for us. And when people hear that, they think, well, my behavior is my behavior, or that person just behaves that way. My work is looking at why is a person doing a behavior that is no longer working for them, and then unpacking that, because behind the behavior, which we see as not, in ourselves or someone else, as not fun, not good, it's obvious to everyone it's not working, is their beautiful, precious story. And at one point it did work for them. And I look at that as, we're really a bunch of, when we're children, our brains are just badass, that we can think about what to do in a moment to survive and create the most perfect solution. And we've talked about your solutions were different than my solutions. You got quiet and I got big and got loud and got funny. And those things work for us. And then they're not working for us now as adults. No. And so what adults do is we tweak our behaviors, but it's so important for the listeners to get, there's nothing wrong with you. You're absolutely perfect the way you are. You may not have the right tools on your tool belt. And I use radio, people can't see this, but I have like it's not a necklace or a bracelet. Some people make these when I work with them, but everybody gets these little tools as reminders. So the tools that I use in my work are the scissors of revision, and there's a little pair of scissors. It's just a little charm. And the Om sign, which is about my number one job, and we talked about this last week or the week before, is to keep my central nervous system calm and peaceful. Then I can respond from a place of how I want to respond rather than reaction. And getting out of reactivity. And then the airplane, we actually did a lesson about the airplane. So yeah, it's not just about people. Who am I hanging around with that does lift or thrust or drag or weight? But what are my thoughts that I habitually run in my head that create anxiety? And anxiety, when we're talking about trauma, PTSD is an anxiety disorder. Yeah. So really turning those around. And I'm a meta coach. And what is metacognition? So that's what we're talking about here is the main theme. We are the only beings on earth that we know of that can watch our own thoughts and then make a decision about, do I want to believe this? Does this work for me anymore? Is this who I want to be in this moment? How can I show up? And it's a beautiful gift that we have that other creatures don't. We've talked about the little fly and how the fly keeps doing the same behavior. It's called the gravitational pull to the familiar. And when we talk about transcendentalists and people, they knew this truth, and it is the truth. If I keep flying into the window with all my energy and just try harder and try harder and try harder, I'm going to die. And death can be physical pain or emotional pain or not living out my soul's, who my beautiful soul is, and not doing that thing.
Yeah, you saw a great example with your dog doing the same thing over and over again in the yard.
Hector, my little Hector, he's such a great guy. And then the rule of 5. So I've got a little hand here that has a heart in the middle, which is the 5 people that I spend my most time with, I will become the average of those 5 people. And so we looked at the auditorium last week, and who are the 5 people that I have up close to me, and where is everybody else in that? And what are they talking about? What is their mindset? What are they very busy learning? And I got a little feedback from one of the listeners. It was great, Liz. Can I share with you?
Yeah,
I talked about my buddy Anita. She's one of my 5 that I chose Anita last year. She's relatively new to my tribe for various reasons. Anita is very successful financially. And I have had up until now a lot of paradigms about money. Do you have any of those?
Oh my gosh, so many. I'm sure a lot of our listeners do too.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of money.
A lot of roadblocks there.
And she is a rock star who knows how to catch the paradigm, rework it, stop it, redo it. And so that was one thing. And just from being friends with her, I really attribute her that my income has increased dramatically because I have learned things by just listening to her that weren't part of my meta resources before that.
I find that energetically too, when we're in somebody's space, we, even if somebody's up here, vibrating and I'm down here, we'll equalize each other and bring each other either up or down, depending on our mood or what we're doing that day or what we're doing in our life. So we can energetically meet her as well. Exactly. In her space with her money beliefs.
It's so true, and it's that's a juicy thing. I just kind of want to stay here. It's not,
yeah, sure.
It's not on the schedule.
Let's do it.
It's not on the schedule. It's such a juicy thing because we know that spiritually, people talk about this in terms of spiritual beliefs. It's also medicine and science that we know that we vibrate on certain levels. It's been studied. Dr. Stephen Hawkins talked about this, that they measured how people vibrate, and then they measured emotions and how they actually vibrate. So when you're talking about vibrations, a lot of people don't understand this, that the lowest vibration is shame.
Yeah.
It literally takes the energy and drains it out of our body. And the highest vibration, I think the first 2, 3 are joy, love, and there's one more, joy, love, and anyway,
I forget.
I think peace is number 4, but when we're vibrating at that,
give me some peace.
So what we know is a truth, and what I know is a truth is that I constantly am asking myself this question. And when I'm working with people one-on-one, they struggle with this idea for a long time. So let's say that I want to go hang out with Anita and she's with a bunch of friends who are talking about money. Now, when I go into that meeting and wealth in the big terms, like success in all areas of our life, I could go into the meeting thinking, oh, I don't know about this, and I'm going to feel really uncomfortable, and I'm inadequate, and how am I going to contribute to this conversation? Why did I get myself in this situation? So when we ask questions, the questions vibrate at a certain level.
Yes.
And why is victim. So I've eliminated why from my vocabulary. I can look back at my history briefly. I've done a deep dive. We're not saying don't go back and look at that. But once I've done that, anything else is just drama. So now I'm creating drama in the situation. And then there's why, how, when, what. And each one raises the highest level question we can ask. The highest vibration question is, who do I need to be in this moment? And what I'm calling myself to do is to actually up-level myself in this moment. So I have several people on my tool belt that I carry around with me. One is Dr. Maya Angelou. So occasionally I'll be speaking and someone will in the class, get triggered or have something, and I'll notice what I'm noticing, which is one of the tools, which is, wow, I'm not sure. The radio, I'm holding up a little thing that says, notice what I'm noticing. Metacognition, that's what that is.
Got it.
I really want to show up the best way possible, and I can't bring to mind what I need to do. This happens in a moment. I've been practicing this 25 years. What would Dr. Maya Angelou say right now? And you know what happens every time?
What's that?
Instant download.
Nice.
The perfect. So when you see public speakers up there and you'll go up and say, do you remember when you said this thing? And they say, I don't actually remember that, because they're downloading from their teachers constantly. So the question is, who would I need to be to show up in this conversation? One of my clients wrote me this morning. She's having, it's one of my one-on-one clients, and she's having a really challenging conversation today. And I'm going to talk to her a little bit later and meet with her to work with her. I'm a coach to coach her. And the question I'm going to ask her is, who would you have to be? Your present level, you're nervous, you're angry, you're upset. Who would you have to be, or who do you need to be to step into the shoes of the person that when you walk out of this meeting, you're going to be like, yeah, I nailed that. I was kind, I was considerate, I expressed myself, I left my codependency outside, I asked for what I wanted, I spoke my truth vulnerably and with authenticity. And then we step into it. The greats continually step into discomfort in order to grow. So when people think about, we've done a 3-week session series on healing trauma. It's a long process.
It is. It's just the tip of the iceberg. We're just dipping our toe.
Exactly.
Yeah, in the pool.
Right. So I was watching a video that you did years ago about when you discovered the power of listening to your still small voice. It's not what you called it, around the fire.
Yes. Yeah, listening to my intuition and really trusting my gut, and following those things that were popping into my head to do. Right. Yeah. Do you listen to those, or you just brush them aside?
They're really powerful, as you learned in that piece. So anyway, there's a lot of tools that I implement, but these are my majors on this little keychain. And then the next question is asking myself, what would I love, which will be my discussion with my client later today. Again, what would be the best outcome for this situation? So, yeah.
Awesome. And for the audience who aren't aware, what is meta coaching? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So meta coaching is we're talking again about the idea of metacognition. I can see my thoughts. So a meta coach is not just a coach that gets you through the next step. We're going to actually look at and take apart. And so you can see the poster up here for our online people that says JW Steps to Healing Trauma. I've studied this for 25 years, and a lot of stuff just did not work for me. What I found that worked for me, I've codified and put into a system.
Nice.
So the first piece that's really, really important is to get clear about what our trauma story is. And some people I work with, they've not even let themselves think about that. And so we do a process around that. It's a deep dive process. And then
you were saying before we started, that's not just a one session thing to dive into your trauma story.
Right. And lots of people who work with me, I'm a meta coach. I am not a therapist. So a lot of the people that I'm working with are also working with a therapist, and they have a completely different toolbox. So I'm listening to your trauma story when we're working one-on-one with a different set of ears. And what I'm listening for, the metacognition part, is what messages did you get and why did you get them, and what were your adaptive behaviors that worked for you then that aren't working now? And that's just a gift I have when I'm listening to people. I don't really care that in the grocery store, I mean, I care, but I don't really, my focus is not on that in the grocery store that you saw someone getting beat up and that you jumped into the middle of a fight. That's not, I get that's the result of what. And when we unpack your childhood, we discovered that you jumped in the middle of the fights of your parents and were able to stop them. It makes perfect sense. And part of this deep work is the validation for people that I'm not crazy. This behavior is not crazy. I learned it and it worked.
Yeah.
And now in the grocery store, not so much. That did not work for me. And there were some really bad outcomes. And so teaching people how to get out of reactivity to response. And so today, one of our topics today is about that. So
great.
Meta coaching, really, let's unpack what your messages were. What is your metacognition? Teaching the person I'm working with, how do I notice what I'm noticing? How do I pay attention? That's what it is. I have this impulse right now to do this.
Oh, that attention word. I remember spending a whole day just on attention and intention.
No kidding,
in my
right?
4-year program. It was amazing.
And so what, do you have a tool around that, or is it just something that you do naturally?
Awareness.
Awareness.
Yeah.
Staying awake.
So staying awake, taking a pause, being aware of what's going on, and then formulating a response from that. Right? What are my choices? And this happens in just seconds.
It's really amazing.
Yeah.
Just as a little sidetrack, there's a Viktor Frankl story, who he wrote The Man's Search for Meaning, and he was in a Nazi war camp, and they had taken everything from him. And he had seen his wife go off. He knew he'd never see her again. His family's gone, and he was keeping a journal. He was a writer. And as he wrote his book, one day they did a search. The Nazis came in and searched, and they found his little journal that he had done. And so he got taken and brought before the tribunal, and they held court and were going to punish him. And as he was standing there talking, it's really hard for me to tell this story, even because this man, such an amazing example of this. One of the guards noticed that they had missed his tiny wedding ring. He had this little tiny thin gold wedding band on that they missed. And the guard took it off his hand. And in that moment, he knew this truth. And he said, "They've taken everything from me. What they have not taken from me is my ability to respond. They can't control that. That's mine." And so he has a very famous saying that, and I'm going to just paraphrase, it's the gap. The moment between stimulus and response. In between, there is a moment where I get to choose. And most people don't know this. They believe the thought, react, respond, say that, do this. That's monkey mind. And that's actually coming from a part of your brain that is only interested in survival. And we're in the middle of a really warm room here. There's no survival necessary here. So noticing the thought and making a conscious decision. Do I want to go here? Do I want to say that? What would be the highest level thing? Who would I need to be now to respond in a way where 2 weeks from now, I'm going to feel great about this interaction, that I was integrous and kind, that I spoke my truth, that I took my time. And sometimes that means, wow, I'm really noticing that right now I'm having a reaction. And I'm wondering if we could schedule a time where we could talk about this when chemicals aren't flowing through my body. That'd be great. Would you be willing to do that?
Yeah, it's great work.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us a little bit more about, let's step into betrayal trauma, our topic of the day. And then we'll get to these steps of healing that you were talking about. Okay. That would be awesome.
Great.
So just kind of an overview of what betrayal trauma is, and then maybe walk us through. That would be awesome.
So there's lots of different kinds of trauma underneath the big trauma. The two that I have identified for me, and as a meta coach, I'm able to identify what are the things for this person that continually rule their actions. So betrayal trauma is, in order to survive, I have to trust my caregivers as a baby. I have to. So my brain, even if they're not trustworthy, even if they're hurting and harming me, even if they're not taking care of me, even if they're not giving me my basic needs, even if they're not feeding me, even if I'm in a dirty diaper, I still have to have hope, because hope is the last thing that we lose. When people lose hope, when they say that, when I hear people say, I'm feeling hopeless today, I'm on it, like Zoom, because that is a really, when we finally lose hope. But as babies, our brains are so amazing, and little children, that we continue to trust this person, even though they've demonstrated it for us over and over again. How does that translate into our life? Well, let's talk about a domestic violence victim. The cycle of violence in DV is that, DV standing for domestic violence, that you hit me or you verbally abuse me. I'd actually rather be hit than verbally abused.
Yeah.
Anyway, you verbally abuse me. And inside my mind, betrayal trauma has taught me that if I just love you a little better, if I wait, if I talk to you about this, surely you love me, if I stay a little longer. And so what happens in the cycle of violence? The person comes back and says, I'm so sorry, that'll never happen again. But they don't deal with their underlying trauma. And so a little bit later, guess what happens? It's like clockwork. We know it's going to happen. And the victim's mind says, I know they didn't mean it. They really love me. This is betrayal trauma. That's what it looks like.
Yeah.
Or having friends. Some of my clients will say to me, I have 2 clients right now who are telling me the same story. Basically, my friends are jerks.
Wow.
I know they'll get better if I just keep hanging around with them. And I want to say, and I do say, how long have you been friends with them? What personal growth have you seen? What is it? And this is called the gravitational pull to the familiar, because to step into the unknown, who would I have to be, is so scary. It requires so much courage to get on the stage of my life and quit waiting for someone else to love me and live my authentic life. So that's betrayal trauma.
Yeah, we hope that we can take these people with us, but sometimes they just can't walk the journey with us.
It's true. There's a motivational speaker. I love her. Her name escapes me at the moment, but she talks about getting herself up, and she had like $14. She couldn't buy baby diapers for her baby, and she was putting towels on them, and she just was sitting there, was sobbing and thinking, told her son, this will never happen again. And one of the things she said was that she had to look at all her friends, and she said, I got to get up out of here. I can't hang out with y'all anymore. I do not want to be the queen of the street anymore. I've got to go, because they were vibrating at such a low level. And in my story that I told the first week, each time my girlfriend and I left the back of the truck, we didn't stay with those people when we left the hotel room. We left them behind. We left their thoughts, their paradigm. I love you. I wish you well. I'd love for you to come with me on this journey. If you want to stay here, I'm going to go on ahead. And with love and grace. And that's really, really hard for people. So betrayal trauma keeps people there. It keeps them stuck.
Yeah, I can see that.
Until we recognize what it is. Yeah. Where do you want to go from
here? Okay. How about if we move on to, you started with trauma story. Let's go on to choice point.
So most people that when I begin working with them and when I'm leading seminars, I see that a lot of people have an unprocessed trauma story, and they really need to go into therapy with a qualified trauma therapist. This is important. There's lots of therapists out there. I would go to a therapist, sit down, have a meeting with them. If there was not a vibe, and I would ask them and interview them, what are your qualifications dealing with trauma? And there's some good ones right here on Vashon. And process that trauma story to the point where it becomes a story that it's not actually informing my actions anymore, and I'm not a victim to it anymore. I'm not mired in it. It's a thing that happened. One of my core beliefs is that your past does not determine your future. And that your story does not determine your future or define you or define your infinite potential. So let's get you out of that first. And when people realize that they have a choice point, here's a choice point. Our life is full of choice points. Do I want to stay here or do I want to pivot? So do I want to stay in the pain or do I want to grow? And growth requires a willingness to get uncomfortable. And that's where about 60% of the population stops. I'd rather stay here in my stuckness than do what it needs to take to step into where I need to go in the discomfort of that.
Right.
So the third step is looking at the paradigms, and we've talked about those. So betrayal, trauma, and also inescapability was one of my other ones where I couldn't get away. We can't get away when we're children. Many people I work with have this inescapability. I have to stay. There's not another way to look at this. And that's just not true when we're adults. We have the power to walk out the door. And people stay for lots of reasons, security, safety. And at the end of my life, I want to have loved fully and lived my full life, my soul's purpose. So looking at those paradigms and then bringing the patterns or the behaviors and beliefs into the light of day. I sit down with my clients and we dive deep. A woman I worked with yesterday, we were talking about her upbringing and how the religious atmosphere of how she was born taught her these certain things about how women behave and what they do. And she sees it now affecting her business.
Wow.
And so she wants to switch that up. So it's not enough to say, well, just quit doing that. Let's go back and see where this started. And it really worked for you because it enabled her to survive and do well in this particular environment. So really shining a light on those things and then identifying how the paradigms are playing out in our life, like right now. So what am I doing that is still that thing?
Right.
That's where it gets really interesting.
Bring awareness to it and break it down. One of my favorite sayings from my education, my 4-year program, was about that. There cannot be change until there's awareness around it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. The light of awareness, shining the light of awareness. Yep. Yeah. I actually keep a little light on my desk in front of me. I have all these tools around me all the time, and that's it. Am I shining?
Those are great reminders.
Yes. Am I shining the light of awareness? Am I looking? Am I awake? Am I paying attention? Am I into habituated behaviors? And then I can have a choice point. I'm a choice point again. So I believe one of my core beliefs is I'm a conscious chooser in my life, and I consciously create what I love or what I don't love. Life by default, life by design. I'm in charge as an adult.
Isn't it awesome when that light goes off and you're like, wait a minute, this is a choice.
I don't have to.
I'm choosing to be here.
Yeah.
Or I'm choosing to do this. Yeah.
It's really super powerful. And that's where we make the pivot. And in every hero's story, there's a pivot. Right. So Joe Campbell uses different words in his old school books, but I think about it in terms of basketball. I'm going this way and then I pivot the other way. And so it's a choice. This isn't going to work. There's something blocking me. And in basketball, literally, there's a big woman standing there who's going to block my shot. So I can go run into her and hope for a different result. Or I can pivot and take a different direction. The fly doesn't pivot in the window. The fly dies where it is. Yeah. Continuing with that. And then it comes down to editing. So this is the work that I do with clients, editing and becoming a conscious chooser. Who are my friends? And this is where we employ the airplane and all those things. What am I doing for work and my avocation? Do I really love it? How am I spending my money, time, and freedom? Money to me is a representative of my freedom and my ability to do the things I want to do and give money where I want to give it. So richness to me means I can help this person or do that or go and enjoy the things that really fill my heart. And then number 8 is a killer.
And I like this one. This is a big one.
We spend so much time on this piece and it just keeps coming up. I think it's its own whole onion.
It is.
Transformational work is one onion and then boundaries is another onion. So working with that piece is so rich, and to see the light come on over and over again. Oh my goodness, I could just say stop to them. Yeah. You could choose to do that. And are you willing to be that person in this next conversation and then see how that feels? And invariably
I think stepping into your voice as well, because you really can't, enforce these boundaries if you don't have a voice.
It's really true. It's so interesting that we both worked in restaurant business because I learned a lot about boundaries in the restaurant business.
So did I. Yeah. Or so have I. I'm so in the restaurant business. I love it. It really brought me out of my shell, and gave me some networking skills and people skills that I didn't have being like super shy when I was younger.
Yeah. And how do I be kind to people, but just kind enough so that they're not thinking that there's more here than there's not, and how much eye contact and what do I do and how do I take an order and what is that piece, and then finding that fine tune. It's really a lot about boundaries. And then repatterning, which is about neuroplasticity. So we have the ability to repattern. We talked about that our patterns in our brains, our neuroconnectors are like cords. You can think of it like a shoelace. And the more we practice it, the more we lift that weight up. I'm not good enough. I can't do this. I'm not sure. I shouldn't walk into here. One of the biggest things I hear from people is, I want to be a public speaker like you. You just woke up one day. I mean, they think it just magically fell out of the sky. No,
it's so hard.
It's really a lot of work. And go ahead.
Yeah, I stood in front of people for the first time, several months ago, and my mind went blank. At one point. So, there's definitely, I can see for myself a process in learning those skills for sure.
Right. And people want to, especially when they're thinking about spiritual work or transformation or personal growth, or if you want to use the scientific words, really changing our minds. They think, oh my goodness, is it really going to take that long? And people will come in and they'll get one session. I say, one session is this. I have packages because it's taken me a long time. And in the past 6 years, really I blasted off because I started being committed to a proven program of study and being in the work constantly with different coaches that I've used. So repatterning, if I'm going to go play basketball, what did we have when I was in high school? A coach. When I swam, we had a coach.
Yeah.
Now I have that all the time. And it requires more practice, enough practice to get my new muscle bigger so that the connection in my brain starts to find the new way of being. I know we've actually talked about this before, but to me, it's the richest thing when I'm in a situation and I hear myself say something that I've been practicing, but I didn't even have to think about it. The new behavior is there. It's online.
Yes.
Yeah. And it happens.
You've got that new neural pathway functioning for you, which is great.
Yep. So people are rewarded in public for what they practice in private, and this comes down to personal growth as well. Yeah. I didn't make that up. Nice. I don't know who to credit it to.
It's fabulous, though.
Right. I do know Tony Robbins says this one, and I love this too, that we are defined by our rituals. What I practice, I will be. And people say, well, I'm practicing this all the time. And I say, your mind is learning all the time. So if you say, I practiced for an hour, and then we look at people's time, I have them look at their money and how they spend the time in their life, they'll tell me, I spent 20 hours this week watching TV. You are practicing. What were you practicing? CNN. Constantly negative news. That's what you practiced for 20 hours. Great. So how's that working for you? Is that really what? They're like, no, that's just my downtime. No, people, there is no downtime.
You are what you see, what you hear, what you experience. That is you.
It's so true. Yeah. It's so true. We live in such a
what are you feeding
place.
Yourself?
Exactly. Right. So until it becomes the new normal. So the short version of that is notice what you're noticing, stop, which is metacognition, and then stop. Literally, sometimes I just say, I'm going to stop right now because I'm noticing that I don't love what's happening inside of me. And I'm not sure what's happening. So let me just slow this down. And my girlfriend and I do this, and I love this. And she's so great. She says, honey, let me know when you figure it out, and we'll talk it through. And we will. And then she'll help me work that through.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And then use the tools, and then ultimately start practicing something new. So quit doing the same behavior and expecting a different result.
It's a real heart-to-heart communication, it sounds like, between the two of you. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, she's a super.
You're taking it to another level.
She's the most amazing person that I've known in terms of this kind of transformational work. And so, and she's also getting online to be a coach, which is really neat.
Sweet.
Yeah. Whoops, sorry about that, folks. Do you want to talk about now the somatic window of tolerance?
Yeah, let's go there. So what is the somatic window of tolerance?
So each one of us has a what they call a window of tolerance. And so it's literally what it is how much can I tolerate my central nervous system in my mind in any given moment. And each one of us is different and operates completely differently about this. So each person that you work with, I know you already know this truth, you can talk about certain things, and other certain things you can see they have a very low tolerance for that. And so our goal a lot of times is to build the tolerance around talking about things so that we're processing them, and then in real time they become more and more comfortable. Our soma, as you know, right, and this is my understanding, you can tell me your definition, but our soma is really, when we talk about Ayurvedic medicine, the juice that flows in us, and it is a literal thing. Some people think of it as like our myofascial tissue, the glue that holds us together, that thing that flows. How'd I do? This is your
great.
area.
No, you're fabulous. It's different words for the same thing, and then every tradition has their own words for it. Energy flow, kundalini, life force, chi, prana.
That's great. Yeah. I didn't know some of those meant that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I might have to write those down after the show.
Sweet.
So the somatic window is because I like to talk in evidence-based terms. And everybody, all of these truths are truths, but I like the evidence-based for people out there that want to say, what's the science? So somatic window tolerance. Dan Siegel is actually a person who you can go and look at about this. So we each have kind of a window where we operate comfortably in. And for radio, you can't see this, but there's just really two horizontal lines, and then there's a little wave in between. And I would invite you to just go online and Google somatic window tolerance images, and it'll pop right up for you. So when we're in a regular day, Liz, we're a little bit up and we're excited, and we're a little bit down, we're a little bit up, we're a little bit down. And that's how most healthy people who are healthy mentally and have the tools to manage themselves and do well do. People who suffer, and suffering people, and I shouldn't have used the word healthy, people who have all the tools that they need to maintain that equilibrium and that balance, that safe place. People who are suffering with PTSD, diagnosed or undiagnosed, it's important for us to know, and everyone does this, so it's not just PTSD people. People have reactivity. A little kid will have a reactive, you'll see them throw a fit in the grocery store. That's reactivity. Everyone has that. They're not getting their needs met in a moment, so their response is whatever various responses. And we talked about this before the show. So your response as a child, what worked for you?
Closing down, being quiet, not making ripples.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we look at this, that's called hyporeactive. It's one of the responses to, I'm outside of my window of tolerance. Something's happening. And you said a little bit about your mom. So something's happening right now that if I do this behavior, it will get me a result that'll work for me. So what was the result that you were after?
She felt pleased and listened to, and the mood shifted.
Right. So when our brain, so it becomes kind of a conscious choice. And mine with my dad was to get funny or to get loud or to be silly or antics. And we became masters at noticing when it was going to explode, which is a whole different trauma pattern around.
Distraction.
I don't even matter, and I'm not even paying attention to myself because I'm so enmeshed with you to keep everybody safe that I don't even exist. So that's another one I work with all the time. That's a wow one, right? So when we have a trauma experience, our brains actually will take over. Now, this isn't about me cognitively thinking I should do this or not do this. My brain will take over in the moment of trauma, and I will respond. And so I will respond in my habituated pattern, and it's just a natural thing that happens. So there's two responses. There's hyperreactivity, where you get one will get bigger and run in and do that thing. I worked in law enforcement. We didn't back off and get small. We ran into the middle of the thing. There's a fight at juvenile hall. I was in it.
Which is what you did as a child.
Right.
You ran in and you did your thing.
Exactly. And so I'm skilled and I'm good at that, taking care of things. When we go back to the work, bringing the pattern into the light of day, my work is no longer to be the protector of the world. My work is actually to enjoy my life. I have a different mission now and to help people in a different way. So all those things that worked, stop working. My little brother would do this. He did what you did. He would go in his room and play with his men, and he could literally disconnect from what was going on in those moments. And so we're having the same experience, but our reaction is different. Now, when
engaging and detaching.
Exactly. And using our tools. So those are the two things I watch for when people are upset. Do they get really quiet? And then the worst thing that I can do is, and I think this has some to do with extrovert, introvert a little bit too, kind of when we pull them together, it's really a complicated conversation, but I identify as an extrovert.
Introvert mostly, but I find that I'm kind of in between. a lot these days.
Right.
Yeah.
And the fascinating thing, when I went down with my PTSD, I actually went down. I went to bed and I did this piece, this hyporeactivity. So there's a ventral vagal nerve that goes through our body. It kind of controls everything in our central nervous system. And the way that it was explained to me by the psychiatrist was your body needs a rest. And so it literally just said, lay down. If you won't do it, I'm going to do it for you. And I needed to rest. And sometimes when we're dealing with our trauma story and I'm working with people and they'll say, I'm exhausted. I'm emotionally exhausted. I tell them, go rest. Your body needs to calm its central nervous system down and have peace and be at peace. So that's really this. Now, the key to this is identifying what are my somatic windows. So we have one big somatic window, but then we all have a bunch of little somatic windows. So if you can see on the YouTube, I've drawn some squares. So this big one, I have a big somatic window of tolerance for talks of politics and religion. I love inclusivity. I love learning about other people's thoughts. I don't need to change them or have them believe what I believe in any way. As long as they're not hurting somebody, I don't care what you believe. And I'm interested in it. So I could talk all day about that. I have a huge somatic window for doing what we're doing here. This actually brings me life. And it's so fulfilling to talk about meaningful things. Yes. So thank you. And I have, some smaller windows of tolerance. And then ultimately it gets down to, I have a really tiny window of tolerance for some things. And those are the things I need to be mindful about if I'm in full recovery and I'm paying attention. So if people who talk about it in 12 steps or in Overeaters Anonymous, if I go into a barbershop over and over, I'm going to get a haircut. So you don't go sit at the bar if you're trying to recover from alcoholism. That's silly. You will eventually have a drink. And you don't, if you're struggling with your weight, it's silly to go somewhere where there's going to be a buffet loaded full of foods that you can't have. It's too much work. So I don't put myself in situations like this. I'm mindful of them, and I do my work behind the scenes, and I think about, what if that does come up? How would I love to react? Who would I need to be? What would I need to do? And I recently had a situation happen that was really triggering for me and interesting. I have a very small window of tolerance for animal abuse. And it really is upsetting to me. And I'm going to spare you the trauma story. And one thing I want to tell folks to be mindful of is there are people who are trained to hear your trauma story, and please don't go dump your trauma story on your friend who is untrained, because you create what's called vicarious trauma for them. I stop people when they start to tell me, because I want to be in a very special place when I'm going to listen to that. I certainly want to be in a session, and I want to have time to put my bubble on and be really aware that this is their story and honoring their story, not taking it in. And a lot of times people want to get instant relief. And so I call it vomit their story. Purging. On other people. And it's really irresponsible to not do it in a place where someone's trained to hear you properly. So there's all those special people that can hear that. So I'm not going to tell you what happened to me around animals. But what I will tell you is it's a small window of tolerance for me. I love animals. They're so great. And ultimately, one of my dogs kept us really safe in our family. And so I love them, and I'm surrounded by them. And this person asked me if I would be willing to go help them move some animals from one place to another. And I just met this person. It seemed pretty innocuous to me. Yeah. And so, long story short, when we showed up, the animals were in really poor. It was very bad. Now, the point of the story is, Liz, because I had done my work behind it, I recognized that I was triggered, that I was outside of my somatic window of tolerance, and my instinct of what I wanted to do in that moment would not have helped anyone. So being able to use all these tools are so powerful. I sat in my car, I took some deep breaths, did the whole 4 square breathing, all my different breathing techniques. I imagined who would I need to be in this moment to help these animals right now. What is my goal? What is my highest intention? these tools in that moment, they worked so well. And it took a day. I was actually in this situation for a day. And then when I got home and this situation sort of resolved itself, I did not pass go. I did not collect $200. I went directly to a therapeutic environment where I could process this with someone who could hear the story and process it with me in a way that was really healthy for everyone involved. And so
that's great self-care.
It's the tools, right?
Yeah.
What a lot of people do is they'll wait. And the difference between having a post-trauma experience and post-traumatic stress disorder is, as children, there was no one there for us to process this with. So it just festered. So one of the things that I want to stress to the listeners when we talk about healing trauma, cute kid in my class one day says, well, Miss Wolf, I love these tools because when I get PTSD, and I said, oh my goodness, sweetheart, stop. These tools are to be used so that you won't get PTSD.
Yeah.
So let's back that up. And how do we do that? As we're healing and working with recovery around what happened where we couldn't get help, we're also dealing with the new things that are coming up rapidly in real time. We're not letting that build up. And that's a really big key. So when we talk about our somatic window of tolerance, it's knowing, what can I tolerate? Who can I tolerate? Sometimes there's people I know when I walk away from them, my central nervous system is jacked up. And guess what I do? Scissors of revision. I love you. We're just not going to be hanging out. And so then that's where boundaries come in and are super useful, and lovingly letting those people go.
Gently exit them to the outer circle.
Exactly. So does this make sense to you, a somatic window of tolerance?
Yes, it's awesome. You have some things written on the side. Can you go through those?
I can. So the hyperreactive is the fight or flight. So when we hear about fight, flight, freeze. So generally, those are the people who are going to run away or fight. That's their response. So if I know that's my response, I can work with that. The knowledge is power with all of this. Ignoring is certain misery. Yeah, that's where the misery comes in.
If you're just acting, just like on autopilot, which is what most people do, is reaction on autopilot with no thought.
Right. Exactly. And we can just do so much damage when we're not being mindful.
Yeah.
So what's happening there is you're having a disorganized cognitive experience. So it'll actually, your mind will take over and put you into a place. They call these flashbacks. I'm not even there, but I'm acting as if I'm at home with my parent who's doing this thing. I don't know if you've ever had this experience, and I won't ask you directly. You can volunteer if you want. But I've been around many people, especially working in juvenile halls and with adults on probation, where they literally are not present. They are, and I've seen this happen with other people. They are not here right now with me. What the things they're saying and doing, and what people on the other side of that will do is like, what are you talking about? Why are you attacking me? What is happening?
Yeah.
This has nothing to do with me. They're actually outside of their somatic window of tolerance right now. And it's really painful for them, and they're not aware that that's happening. The key here is awareness. Wow, I'm feeling really angry. And my inclination, this happened to me actually yesterday, my inclination and anger is an appropriate response. So let me validate that for people. When someone says something or does something that is not okay with you, anger is a really healthy emotion, and it informs us.
It does.
And I noticed that my go-to was, I really want to put them on blast right now. That was my go-to. And this is okay. This is normal. It's all normal. People think, I can't believe you thought that and you've done all this work. I'll probably think that forever. The difference is I notice it, I stop, and I make a conscious decision about what I need to do in that moment.
Yeah. How do you use that anger? And how to use it in a healthy way?
Right. Yeah. Right. And then, do I want to have a conversation with this person or do I not? Am I invested? Do I want to clean it up? Those are all decisions I can make, but not right now while I'm mad. And Pema Chodron has a fantastic book called Don't Bite the Hook. It's not even a book. It's an audio tape. Don't Bite the Hook. It's my favorite. All of the people I work with eventually will listen to that.
I'll have to look up that one. I haven't heard of that one.
Great. Don't Bite the Hook. And I bit. The person threw the little bait out and I felt myself. There was this thing. Boom. I got it. And so what happens is that we get flooded and become emotionally reactive. So it's literally a flood of hormones is what's flowing over us. And if I can notice that, my choice in that moment was to continue on, and I'm good at not letting that be seen. I've learned how to do that. And then I went home and processed that and wrote about it and thought about it. And I didn't look at the person's behavior or my behavior. What I looked at instead is, what is their pattern? What happened with them that they felt the need to say this thing?
Ah, the observer.
Mm-hmm. And then what was my pattern that I bit? Mm-hmm. Isn't it interesting? And so when I'm
choosing to walk away instead of engaging.
I love that so much. And when stuff like that happens, a lot of people say, well, I don't want to walk around having to analyze all this. I think of it as, oh my goodness, this is a great opportunity for growth. Something's just been presented.
You're peeling another layer of onion off.
Yeah, right. Yes.
And it's really a big picture.
Yes.
You're not just dealing with this little thing that happened. It's all of their history and all of your history, and how they got triggered, and then how you got triggered, and then how do you guys process that, and like seeing it for what it is, and seeing the big picture.
It's really, at the same time. It's so rich. Thanks for saying that. And in this particular situation, the thing they said wasn't even at me, but it touched something in me. And in looking back and unwrapping it, what happened, the reason that I got hooked was because in noticing what I noticed, I just noticed all of a sudden I feel constricted and I don't feel expansive anymore, and I can feel like yucky. So what I noticed happened was someone had expressed a feeling and an emotion, and the person labeled it that they were expressing their frustration with a certain thing. And expressing one's frustration is okay in a safe environment. It's a great way to process, and they were actually asking for help with it. And the person labeled it as them being judgmental. I'm noticing that you're being judgmental. So much here to unpack. First of all, they're being judgmental. They're judging the person and calling them judgmental when they're judging. So that's number one. Number two is that in nonviolent communication, a better way would have been, wow, I'm noticing some discomfort with this conversation, and I'm not sure what it is on my end. And after you finish processing yours, if I'm still there, would you be willing to come back with me and do this again? Instead, when they said that, the person expressing their discomfort shut down and got quiet and started judging themselves. So that was an interesting moment, and for me, a hook, because one of my childhood things was I didn't even know how I felt, Liz, because I was told how to feel and what to think. There was no space for me to even identify. And if I dared to feel angry or express anything that was there at all, then I would be told how to feel, what the appropriate response was, and not to be this thing. So what a great thank you to all the people involved in that I got an opportunity to look at, there's still a wounded little child there who wants to be able to be authentic and express things like frustration. And you know what? I'm going to have some self-empathy for myself. That's okay. It's okay if I want to express who I am. And having somebody mirror that back to me as something yucky, you know what? That's really painful. And let me have some empathy for them now too. I think they're trying to be helpful in this moment. I think that's what they're trying to do. That's their intention, and the impact, it's not hitting right. And two of us shut down. So, what is the opportunity here?
Nice.
For me? So being able to look at what are your needs and feelings, what are my feelings and needs in this situation, what is the other person's needs and feeling, and what I know is I need to go and backtrack. I'm going to choose to go and backtrack now and have a conversation with two of those people privately when I'm really resourced about it. To have a discussion when I'm upset about it is a mistake. So when I'm outside of my window of tolerance, when my central nervous system isn't like in la la land and I'm not totally ohmed out, not the time to have the conversation. So that's really a key. So our ventral vagal controls our emotions. It's really, and that's an overgross explanation, but it really is what helps us regulate and taking care of that through all the things that we do. And when our ventral vagal system is really on and lit up in the way that it's supposed to, little things don't bother us. So part of trauma recovery is taking care of more and more of these things, so the things that trigger us become fewer. And then you said the most beautiful thing when we were talking before. I don't know if you remember, but as I mature and get better and better, the same thing comes to me again. Do you want to speak to that in your own words, or let me keep going?
Oh no, keep going.
The same situation will come, and I get to observe myself handle it in a new way. And then at the same time, I can still look at, because I'm using metacognition, I'd still like to tweak that little piece right there. I don't love that little piece. So it's getting better and better and better. When my teacher says, I'm getting better and better every day in every way. That's really the goal.
Oh, I love that. That's great.
Not perfection. That's not perfect.
No.
It's not possible.
It's an ongoing journey. There's really not an end to it. It's a process.
It really is. So I need to make sure I know what are my things that I have a small window of tolerance for, and then not avoid them. Most people will just avoid this. And so they'll say, I don't want to talk about that. So for me, what I want to do is a risk management perspective is I'm going to practice this behind the scenes and practice responses that are appropriate and work for me. One person I'm working with, and I was explaining to her, she said, well, this seems so simple. And I said, I practiced that for months before I got it. Everything that we do requires practice.
Yeah.
So just kind of wrap it up. I heard this really cool story. I might have said this in one or two, but I love it so much. Who was that one great painter? Picasso. Some woman came up to him. Did I tell the story already?
No, go ahead.
Somebody came up to Picasso and said, I don't know if the story's true, but it rocks. And said, can you paint my painting? And he said, yeah. And she said, how much? And he said, $1 million. And she said, all right. She was pretty, bourgeois. So she wrote him a check, whatever the equivalent was $1 million. And he said, all right, sit down. And so he starts painting, and 10 minutes later, he's done, and he hands her the painting. And she says, well, wait a minute, I paid you $10 million for that. And it just took you 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And he said, no, it took me 10 minutes plus 50 years.
Yeah.
And I love this piece.
I think that's awesome.
Right?
Yeah.
That's
the work.
That is the work right there. So we want to paint a beautiful painting of our lives. It requires practice, and it requires falling off the bike and getting uncomfortable and getting in the auditorium. And if you want to sit outside, and you're never going to realize who you could be fully and live your life to the fullest. Do I have time for one more little thing?
Maybe one more little thing. We have about 3 minutes left, but I want to also have you share again, what's coming up and how people can work with you and what your website is too also.
Thank you so much for that. I just am reading this book right now. It's called Everything is Figure Outable. I really recommend it. I've listened to it already once or twice and read the book. I bought the book and I'm underlining because it's so good. And she's talking about this woman who studied death and people in palliative care. And what she learned is that half of the population never lives half the life they wish they would have. And the saddest thing is that at the end of their lives, they figure out that they've lived someone else's life. And or what they wanted them to live. And when we're talking about this stuff, these things I learned from my parents was what they wanted me to be.
Yep.
And I'm not interested in living their reality. I want to live me and my soul's signature fully. So I just love that. I love that piece.
That's beautiful.
So
how can we reach you?
thejamiewolf@gmail.com, just spelled out TheJamiewolf@gmail.com. And lots of things coming up. My new website will be online tomorrow.
Great.
thejamiewolf.com.
Sweet.
And it'll have a landing page at least. And looking at you can work with me privately, which I love. Lots of practices. That's for people who want to take a deep dive, and I'm only interested in working with those folks. And then I lead a bunch of seminars around, so you can bring me to your organization. We could talk about that if you want. So,
yeah, tell us about that too. And then what you have coming up. You have a couple of engagements coming up.
I'm flying out Monday, and I'm going to be teaching to 3 different organizations. The first one for 3 days, so it'll be 90 people with that organization around trauma and resiliency. It's really a big topic right now.
Yeah.
And then I'm moving over to that'll be in Kern County, in Southern California, in the middle of California. Then I'm moving up to San Francisco area and working with an entire department around emotional intelligence, which is really exciting.
Sweet, that's a buzzword right now.
Yes, and then going to talk to 300 of the people who lead social services organizations and work with our most endangered populations around.
Awesome.
So the people who like literally run foster care, the people who take in kids when they're taken away at the border, people who place children, that kind of thing. And it's going to be a day of a deep dive for them around their own self-care. And I love that work. That is so
Oh,
rich.
that's awesome. That's so important.
And that's going to be filmed. So eventually that will be available
great.
online. Yes.
Nice. So we could all check it out.
You could all check
Cool.
it out.
And then you have something special for Vashon?
For Vashon, I am going to announce there that I've got a four-week series coming up about love and relationships, and really how to deepen your love and relationships. Maybe things have gotten stale, and looking at evaluating who you're spending your time with. A real deep dive, and that's going to be an online course, and it's at a really special price. I didn't bring the price. I think it's $371, something like that. And it's going to be out there for between $700 and $1,000 later. But Vashon, fill it up. I'm only going to take 20.
Take advantage of this. It's going to be an incredible experience. Just like our series has been. It's been so awesome having you on the show and interviewing you and having you give us all of this information and walk through all of this amazing work that you're doing. It's been such a treat to have you on the show. Feel really blessed to have you in the studio with me. And thank you everyone for joining me today. This is Raise the Vibe. I'm Liz Peterson on Voice of Vashon's 101.9 FM KVSH. Have a great day, everyone. And remember to get out there and raise the vibe. Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much for everything you do. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, Jimmy. Well, I appreciate you too. Thanks for joining us, everybody, today. It's been awesome. Jamie, thank you so much. Is there anything that you want to say to our YouTube listeners before you go?
You know what I want to say is my hair is flat. First of all, I want to say just a really big shout out for you for doing this important work, and that your vision, as I understand it, is to help people find the resources that they need to live lives of joy and peace. Is that right?
Yes.
And that you really put yourself out there. And I'm so excited to hear about what you're going to do with VCA and Vashon Center for the Arts and all the things that you're doing out there in addition to your work. So thank you for who you are and being committed to all of that. I really honor you and thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And if you want to check me out on Raise the Vibe, go to www.voiceofvashon.org/raise-the-vibe, and you can hear all of Jamie's recordings on there as well. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Namaste. All right.